I was having y'all, your boy Rico from StreetScores. I have the next wave of Jeremy Fowler reports from ESPN. We have a lot to talk about today. First of all, we got to talk about how the projected cap space for the NFL is making a bigger jump than people expected, and the Commanders are estimated to have $82 million in cap space. We're going to dive into that first. Also, Jeremy Fowler said that, one, the Washington Commanders will spend big on offensive line and defensive line in free agency. Also, we're reportedly interested in Kupp. There's probably some mutual interest there. We're going to dive into what that even possibly means. And of course, I have the trivia question. The trivia question for today is, who posted the first 4 interception game of his career to lead the Commanders in that category in 2022? I'm gonna give y'all the answer at the end of this video, even though I feel like most of y'all probably remember this. But before we get into everything, make sure you still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Be on the lookout for consistent videos. I know I've been doing like a video every other day, but now we're about to get back to like 2 videos a day type of stuff. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Without further ado, man, let's go and dive into this video right now instead of wasting more of y'all time. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so first of all, the NFL sets their salary cap every year after the season and before the new league year. Shouts out to Scott Jennings of Hogs Haven for, this small paragraph that we're going to read real quick. It had been steadily rising by like 10 to 12 million a year since 2013. A new CBA was signed in 2012 after a lockout, and the TV deals pumped a ton of money into the league's coffers, which allowed the pot to grow for the players. That changed 4 years ago as the NFL looked to spread out some of the losses from the last 3 years. The cap dropped $15.7 million going from 2020 to 2021, but it bounced back 3 years ago and has been growing bigger every year since. The NFL sent a memo to teams today, well, technically yesterday, February 19th, saying that the salary cap will fall in the range of $277.5 million to $281.5 million for the 2025 season, which is crazy because that means the cap space would have increased by more than $53 million over the last 2 seasons, which is more than what people expected. The NFL is still king right now. When it comes to making money, can't do much better than the NFL right now. And so, based off of the base salary cap projected to be at least $279.5 million according to Over the Cap, the Commanders will have $82,210,668 worth of cap space, man. Super excited. And then technically the effective cap space would be $75.48 million to use. But either way, the most important thing is that we're third in cap space. Now, I've already broke this all the way down last year, how when you're one of the teams that has the most cap space in the NFL, the cap space increasing more than people expect actually kind of hurts you. Like, if anything, that helps a lot of the teams that are more so that are like in the negatives. Like, now you're in the positives. You don't have to necessarily cut as many players as you thought you would have. Percentages wise, technically the Commanders gain less from the cap space increasing than a team like the Cowboys, who gained a lot from the cap space increasing. They go from being in the negative to in the positive by $2 million. Now, of course, the Commanders are still in a great spot. No need to complain at all. The cap space increasing, again, this is a relative thing. Relatively, the Commanders gain a little less than the Cowboys gain when the cap space increased, as an example. But either way, cap space increasing still helps us. That's what allows us to potentially start looking at, hey, maybe we should go ahead and sign Terry McLaurin long term. Probably going to do a video breaking that down as well in the near future. But these are just things to think about. But and just also to let y'all know, we have $82 million in cap space, which is the third most in the NFL. The Giants are all the way down there, like 10 spots below that at $48 million worth of cap space, less than half of what we have. And then the Eagles are even further down, like 7 spots down from that, 8 spots down from that at $19.5 million. Then again, the Cowboys are at $2.4 million. One of the bottom 8 cap space situations in the entire NFL. But again, with the cap space increasing, now instead of being negative, they're technically slightly in the positive. So again, the cap space growing more than anybody expected helps us, it helps everybody, but of course it helps the teams that have the least amount of cap space more than it helps the teams that have the most amount of cap space. But at the same time though, when you're like a top dog, super duper top free agency destination like we are, where I truly believe if you mix in Super Bowl contention, amount of cap space, franchise quarterback, we are literally the #1 free agency destination out of the entire NFL this upcoming free agency, right? And with that, the cap space increasing probably helps us more than it would help another team that has a lot of cap space. Because again, we're third in cap space behind the Raiders and the Patriots, but I'm pretty sure a lot of players, even though the Patriots and Raiders gaining a lot of cap space, they're looking at them like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even take more money to play for y'all. I prefer to play with a Super Bowl contending team like the Commanders. When you're looking at all of the top teams right now, out of all of the Super Bowl contenders, I mean, we have the most money out of any potential Super Bowl contender. And then out of all of the teams with the most cap space, we're the only one that's even relative to a Super Bowl. Like, you have the Patriots, Raiders, then us, then you have the Cardinals, and we're the only Super Bowl contender out of that top group. And then even like if you throw in the Chargers, Bears, and Vikings, and Steelers, we made it further than all of those teams. Bengals, we made it further than them. We beat the Lions, who's next. And then you have the Titans, who are terrible and have the #1 overall draft pick. So like the window that we're in as far as top cap space and being a Super Bowl contender, we're sitting very pretty this offseason. I think we're going to have a really fun offseason. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. And going back to Hogs Haven, shouts out to Scott Jennings again. He said Washington is coming off their best season since 1991, improving from 4-13 under Ron Rivera to 12-5 under new GM Adam Peters and head coach Dan Quinn. This turnaround started in 2023 when Josh Harris bought the team and the entire fan base cheered as former owner Dan Snyder sailed away to Europe. Peters and Quinn overhauled the roster, bringing in a lot of vets on one-year deals via free agency before taking former LSU quarterback Jada Daniels with the #2 overall pick, of course. The Commanders season ended with a loss to the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game. That loss is driving Daniels, Peters, Quinn, Harris, and everyone in the organization to improve and take the next steps towards a championship. Free agency officially starts on March 12th, with the legal tampering period opening 2 days before that. So March 10th is when we're going to start to see things really kick off. Washington will need to make decisions on their own large list of pending free agents. We have a lot of guys that were starters and strong contributors to last year's team that is technically not on roster right now. So remember that when we're taking a look at all of the cap space that we have, remember we need to save a chunk of that for the fact that we are going to have to use some of it for the guys that were playing here last year. Not outside team free agents. We're looking at receivers and defensive linemen and other teams. Remember, so just put some of that money aside for guys like Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, if we even end up trying to re-sign Marcus Mariota, Dante Fowler, all of those guys. We've already talked about that in other videos. We can revisit that in another video later in the future. And also the players that they're trying to add to the team for season 2 of their roster recalibration. And then now moving on to the first report that we need to talk about, and this is the Cooper Kupp one. So according to Jeremy Fowler, the Commanders are potentially interested in trading for Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp. Trading is strong. Now, would I be willing to sign Cooper Kupp after the Rams release him as a cap casualty? Cool. As long as they know that he's not your wide receiver 2, he's your wide receiver 3 at best. We're going to dive into that soon. But the fact that we're willing to trade for him is a little strong, man. I don't know about trading for Cooper Kupp. Even if it's only like a 6th or a 7th round draft pick, the Rams have already admitted they want him off the team so bad. If they cannot find a team to get him to, then they'll just cut him. So don't be that team that's that desperate that's going to be willing to give up draft picks while everybody else isn't. And now you just gave the Rams free draft picks where they would have cut him anyway. So trading is crazy. That's too far. Hope Jeremy Fowler is lying or misinformed in that way. But he said, quote, talking to people around the league, Cooper Kupp will have a market because he's so quarterback friendly. Basically explaining that this is why you may have to trade for him, because there are going to be teams that are interested in him enough to potentially trade for them as well. We may not be the only team. And then finishing up the quote, certainly Washington is looking for a complimentary #2 wide receiver, unquote. And then even Dove Kleiman said Washington is looking to make big moves this offseason. And just to remind y'all right now, the only 2 wide receivers on this entire roster right now under contract for 2025 are literally Terry McLaurin and Luke McCaffrey. Nobody else. Olamide Zaccheaus, Jamison Crowder, De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown. Yeah, KJ Osborne, I guess if you want to count him, all of those guys are off of contract. They are not signed to this team right now. If you want to bring any of those guys back, you got to also take into account those contracts, and you have to subtract that from the cap space that we have as well. Those guys are not included in that $82 million worth of cap space. Now, granted, I'm not saying bring back all of those guys or even necessarily any of them. I mean, I would like to bring back maybe Dyami Brown to be like a wide receiver 4 for a very cheap contract, but that's about it. My point is, though, we are going to be pretty active as far as bringing in new wide receivers. Whether it's big names like Chris Godwin or T. Higgins or trading for a Garrett Wilson is one thing, but we will be bringing in wide receivers. Well, I'm pretty sure we're going to bring some through the draft, some undrafted free agents as well, but do not be surprised if we're very active in the receiver market, even if it's not for big names. You know, I'm not saying get your hopes up just simply because we only have 2 wide receivers on contract right now that's currently technically on the roster. We will have to play a game tomorrow. We only have 2 wide receivers, but just because of that does not mean we're going to be desperate enough to go and spend huge money to go get 1 star. Don't be surprised if instead they go and get a bunch of decent, good guys, maybe assembling a wide receiver core that's not what we hoped it's going to be going into 2025, but maybe it's at least an improvement from what we had last year with Olamide, Dyami Brown, Noah Brown, all of those type of guys. Again, Terry McLaurin, Luke McCaffrey, all we got right now, and I'm expecting us to bring back maybe a couple of guys from last year, but I'm thinking we're going to also bring in some new outside guys from other teams. And y'all already know how I feel about Cooper Kupp. I've talked about this in a previous video. I would not trade for him, but I'd pick him up as a cheap free agent signing with the mindset that we are still looking for a true wide receiver 2. Pick up Kupp to be your cheap, dependable wide receiver 3, especially since this training staff was able to get 20 games out of Bobby Wagner and injury-prone Zach Ertz each last year. Each of those guys gave you 20 games last year. So I'm optimistic that, you know, if we bring in a guy like Cooper Kupp, who's been notoriously injury prone lately as well, we could be able to get a lot of games out of him as well. The way that this training staff does things, not, you know, forcing guys like Zach Ertz and then, you know, Cooper Kupp potentially next to practice on Wednesdays. You skip every Wednesday practice all year, especially once we get to like the regular season and stuff. Like you skip those. Whatever they're doing behind the scenes, diet-wise, exercise-wise, physical therapy-wise, it's working. Again, 20 games out of Zach Ertz in 2024 is crazy, to the point that we want to re-sign him for 2025 and run it back. If they could do that with Zach Ertz, I don't exactly see why they could not do that with Cooper Kupp. So that's why I'm looking at Cooper Kupp like best case scenario wise. You like if you're thinking about signing Cooper Kupp, how good could he be? How bad could he be? I'm looking more so at the higher end, the more glass half full end, because again, this training staff I think they'll be able to get more games out of him. And I also think Jaden Daniels is going to bring out greatness in him to the point that he may not go back to being the guy that won Offensive Player of the Year, but I think he could at least be somewhere in the middle of that and what he was just last year. I think we can get pretty good stuff out of Cooper Kupp, but I still only see him as a wide receiver 3, even in that best case scenario. I also think maybe you bring back Dyami Brown as like a really cheap wide receiver 4, but then you still do whatever it takes to go get a wide receiver 2, maybe like a Chris Godwin, trade for a Garrett Wilson, do whatever you got to do, because again, T. Higgins doesn't look very likely to be an option for us unless the Bengals do not franchise tag him, but I still don't think it makes sense for them to franchise tag him, but I'm seeing reports that they will, and if they do, highly doubt we end up with T. Higgins. But yes, I would like to bring in Cooper Kupp, plain and simple, just not trade for him. And also, he better not be our headline signing in free agency that's supposed to be Terry McLaurin's running mate or something like that. Sign Cooper Kupp for cheap and still stay aggressive with getting the true Terry McLaurin partner in crime, the wide receiver 2, through somebody else, because it should not be Cooper Kupp. Kupp can be a very good safety net for Jaden Daniels, who's always open and is like a great when in doubt option for Jaden, just like a receiver version of like Zach Ertz was for us last year, who ended up being our second leader receiver at tight end. And then do whatever you got to do to get somebody at least at like a Chris Godwin level, but we'll see. But also, apparently, Jeremy Fowler then went out and said that he believes while the Commanders will address the wide receiver 2 position in some form, they instead might allocate more resources to offensive line and defensive line pass rush specifically. He said exactly this quote, Adam Peters and head coach Dan Quinn, they kind of pieced it together the best they could. They did an admirable job, but I'm expecting reinforcements there on the offensive line and defensive line. Yes, I'm aware Washington fans want that number 2 receiver opposite of Terry McLaurin, I do think they'll address that in some form, but they could allocate more resources to offensive line and pass rush, unquote. And now, especially since he emphasized pass rush specifically, not even just defensive line, but pass rush specifically, I think there's something to that, for real. Like, I really think that I feel like they are going to go looking for some wide receiver options out there to improve what we had from last year. But I think, if anything, if they had to choose between the two, between the trenches and skill position players, they're definitely going to put more money towards the trenches. And I kind of agree. Like, the wide receiver thing is a shiny new toy, but the whole shiny toy thing that everybody looks at, ooh, look, we got a great receiver. But at the end of the day, the game is won in the trenches. You saw from how the Philadelphia Eagles just dominated this entire season. It was because they had arguably the best offensive line in the football, and they had literally the best defensive line in football. That's what happens when you draft a bunch of Georgia guys, but who am I to say? But then you have Joanne Coley of Sports Illustrated bringing up some good points. The offensive line struggled at times last year for the Washington Commanders, making improved protection for quarterback Jaden Daniels a key focus. I completely agree. Like I've said before, I don't think offensive line is the worst position group we have on the team, but it's still our number one need until it's fixed because of the quarterback that we have. If we didn't have like a true franchise top 5 in the NFL quarterback type of guy, like one of the elites, then offensive line is like, yeah, like you need to fix it, but you know what I'm saying? We'll see what happens. But the fact that we know we have the guy, a guy that can be the face of the NFL, a Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen level type of guy, I feel like even though offensive line isn't anywhere near one of our worst position groups on the team, I feel like you can look at wide receiver, cornerback, defensive line, maybe even linebacker, especially with Bobby Wagner on contract, not on contract yet. We'll see what happens with safety. You could even still make an argument with tight end even after you bring back Zach Ertz, running back as well. Like, offensive line isn't the worst position group we have on the team, talent-wise, but it's the biggest priority of improvement for this team because we need to do whatever we got to do to protect our most valuable asset, and that's our quarterback, Jaden Daniels. Finishing up with Joanne Coley of Sports Illustrated said, on the defensive side, the Commanders are set to lose pass rusher Dante Fowler Jr. in free agency, creating a hole in their front seven that will need to be addressed. Now, I'm not exactly sure why people like Jeremy Fowler and then this Coley person on Sports Illustrated are just assuming that we will not bring back Dante Fowler. I actually think there's a pretty decent chance that we do. Dante Fowler really likes Dan Quinn. He's followed him now to the third team that he's played under Dan Quinn with, like the Falcons, Cowboys, and now the Commanders. Wherever Dan Quinn goes, Dante Fowler goes, and he's even willing to sign, team-friendly contracts to stay with the guy. Like, he's willing to take pay cuts and make less money to stay with Dan Quinn. So I don't really see why we would get rid of Dante Fowler. I still feel like we still need to go and trade. Even if you bring back Dante Fowler, you still need to do whatever you can to try to trade for like a Myles Garrett or at least sign a Khalil Mack or something like that. Dante Fowler can be a part of the solution, but he's not going to be the solution to edge rusher. We don't have enough run stopping and edge setting there with a Dante Fowler guy. He's a situational pass rusher that we were forced to play more often than we necessarily wanted to last year. And now, granted, he rewarded us with double-digit sacks, but he's not a good run defender at all at the edge rusher position. And Dorrance Armstrong wasn't very good at it either. We need a guy that can do both. And so, again, I like Dante Fowler. Bring him back for cheap. But that's not where you stop when it comes to defensive line improvements from last year. And then offensive line-wise, Mark Bullock brings up two names that I certainly agree with. These are like my two top names as offensive linemen go, especially tackle-wise in free agency. And I've been looking at them. I've been watching tape on this second guy lately, like the past few weeks. But shouts out to Mark Bullock because I agree. I feel like he worded it pretty well. He said, I think Stanley would make a ton of sense in Washington. Lots of similarities between the Ravens offense and the Commanders offense. Most notably, the fact that we both have top mobile quarterbacks in the NFL that are very fast, love to run, and offensive linemen knowing how to protect for a guy like that is huge. And then he also finished up by saying, also intrigued by Alaric Jackson of the Los Angeles Rams. Let me put you on. If you're not exactly sure of who this guy is, let me put you on. He finished by saying, rare to find guys that size that can move that well. Younger profile as well. Now, first of all, y'all already know how I feel about Ronnie Stanley. Yes, sign him. Especially with his experience of specifically blocking for and protecting a top mobile quarterback, a guy with legs like Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson. That's hard to find a tackle with that exact experience right there. That is a very specific thing to be good at and to be knowledgeable of, is knowing how to protect a very mobile quarterback like that. That specific experience can be be huge for helping maximize Jaden Daniels' legs and his usage and protect them while he's doing it. And especially with Brandon Coleman looking more like a guard, like honestly, I feel like we should move him to guard. We'll see if Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, and those guys agree. And then especially with Samuel Cosme hurt as your starting right guard, so Ronnie Stanley would come in with a high floor and a higher expectation to be able to do his job immediately over, like, if any other option, like if you say we took a tackle 29th overall in the draft, I wouldn't immediately expect them to start at left tackle for us and we're good to go. Ronnie Stanley comes in with a certain floor that makes me very comfortable with what we have to work with offensive line wise going into 2025. He may not be Trent Williams, but he doesn't necessarily have to be, is my point. And then you also have that Alaric kid that was an undrafted free agent for the Rams just a couple of years ago that has developed into a really good starting left tackle as of late. Shouts out to Pro Football Focus, because of course they have their whole list of their top free agents. They have descriptions and everything. They pointed out the fact that, first of all, he's 46th on their list of free agents. Out of every free agent possible, he's 46th. And out of all of the tackles, just specifically, they have him as their 4th ranked tackle. And they have Ronnie Stanley as their number 1 tackle, ranked 8th out of their entire top 100 free agents, regardless of position. Again, Alaric Jackson is 46th. You can make an argument, especially future-wise, projection-wise, Alaric should actually be the top tackle available in free agency, but we'll get there soon. Either way, first of all, he's only 26.6 years old right now. He'll be 27 at some point during the season, but that's still pretty young. And Pro Football Focus said the former undrafted free agent out of Iowa has settled in quite nicely over the past few years, protecting the blind side of Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford with a career year across the board in 2024 coming at just the right time. They're projecting him to get a 4-year deal at less than $15 million per year. I would do that today if we could. I would sprint to go get him to sign that contract. And when it comes to their grades, they felt like in 2022 he earned a 64.1, where he didn't play much. He only played 422 snaps. But in 2023, once he took on a full-blown starting role, he played 1,026 snaps. They felt like he had a 66 grade. And then most recently in 2024, this past season, at 1,017 snaps, they gave him a 78.4 Pro Football Focus grade, which is 18th out of all tackles in the NFL. That's pretty good. 18th ranked tackle is better than anything we had last year at tackle. And then shouts out the Pro Football Network, because they said in his second season as the Rams starting tackle, Alaric Jackson cut his pressure rate allowed from 7.4% in 2023 to 4.7% in 2024. That was the 10th lowest pressure rate allowed among offensive linemen who played the majority of their snaps at left tackle. By raw totals, Jackson also cut his hits allowed in half, from 8 in 2023 to 4 in 2024. Jackson turns 27 years old in July and has demonstrated an ability to hold up at the most valued offensive line position, which should earn the former undrafted free agent a lucrative multi-million-dollar deal. And that's another thing too. This guy is durable. He played 15 games in 2023, and then he only played 14 games in 2024 because he was suspended for 2 games from the NFL. And shouts out to this Rams reporter Brock Vieira, because he's making the case as to why the Rams need to do whatever it takes to bring back Alaric Jackson and not let him hit him free agency and even get a chance to talk to other teams. They want him back that bad. They said it's no secret that Alaric Jackson is simply that dude. Having played outstanding over the past 2 seasons, Jackson has finally cemented himself as one of the best left tackles in the entire NFL, and that's what at least top 3 as far as positional value. As quarterback, I would argue edge rusher second, and then tackle third, probably, as the 3 most valuable positions in football. And he's arguably one of the best at one of the top 3 positions. And if you can get him, especially while he's just now entering his prime, come on, man, you can't miss. They also said after Andrew Whitworth's retirement, the Rams attempted to use Joe Noteboom as his replacement. Obviously, that didn't work out. If not for sheer luck, Jackson may not have worked out either, as opportunities to play were very few and far in between to start his career. However, that is a thing of the past, and considering Jackson has yet to enter the prime of his career, he is a man ready to make moves in the NFL to secure his legacy and financial future. Our friends at Pro Football Network recently released their top 100 list of impending NFL free agents, and they have Alaric Jackson 9th out of all free agents, regardless of position. 9th. The only players he's behind are DJ Reed at corner, who I would take, Morgan Moses at tackle, Byron Murphy at corner, Khalil Mack at edge rusher, Chris Godwin the wide receiver, Josh Sweat edge rusher, Trey Smith the guard, and T. Higgins the wide receiver. They feel like Alaric Jackson is better than everybody else out of any other person that's available in free agents. That's including even Sam Darnold, Ronnie Stanley, even all-pro linebacker Zach Bond of the Eagles, Justin Reed, Carlton Davis, Dan Moore, Tyron Smith, Brandon Sheriff, Coleman Shelton, Kevin Zeitler, Kelvin Beachum. I mean, they have so many guys in this list that they feel like, again, he's ninth out of everybody. Going back to that article from the Rams reporter, Jackson is the second highest tackle and third highest lineman on the list, only behind Trey Smith and tackle Morgan Moses. It is Pro Football Network's opinion that Jackson would be lower than Morgan Moses, but considering Moses is 33 years old, how much tread does he even have left on his tires? That's a good point. So again, maybe I could see a slight argument for Morgan Moses. I really don't. I still feel like Alaric Jackson is better now and future-wise. And that means teams are ready to circle Alaric Jackson, offering him generational money for his services. That simply could not happen. Again, it's coming from a Rams reporter. The Rams need to prioritize his re-signing because he understands the offense. He brings consistency to the position, and any attempt to replace him could derail a championship effort. And then he goes into a whole nother thing of like options they could look for outside of him if he does end up leaving. He even talks about potentially franchise tagging him if they have to. So if this guy hits the open market, the Commanders should prioritize trying to bring him in. And then defensive line wise, I mean, I think we should go and get Myles Garrett. I mean, you have Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, or Max Crosby as trade options. Then you also have Dallas Cowboys defensive tackle Osa Odigizua and Chargers edge rusher Khalil Mack as like top defensive line free agents that you don't have to trade for, especially since Jeremy Fowler emphasized pass rush specifically for defensive line. He didn't even say defensive line. He said they're looking to allocate more resources towards defensive line and pass rush specifically. And I really like both Khalil Mack and Osa to not only help with the pass rush as well, but also stop the run and help us with that category because we were one of the worst in the NFL at stopping the run from a defensive line standpoint. And Khalil Mack and Osa will help us both there because Osa is a double team eater and still finds a way to make plays. And Khalil Mack was arguably the best run-stopping, edge-setting edge rusher in the entire NFL just this most recent season, and I still believe he has easily double-digit sacks left in him, especially in a defense coached by Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. Again, you've had like neutral national analysts, like football experts, basically saying that Dan Quinn is arguably the best defensive coach at maximizing each individual player's skill sets. So basically, if we were to go and trade for like a Michael Parsons or trade for a Myles Garrett or go and sign a Khalil Mack or whatever would happen, expect them to have the best possible seasons that they can have under a Dan Quinn coach defense because they're not lazy. They pointed out the fact that Dan Quinn does not just assume because you're very talented, you'll figure it out on your own. No, he does everything from a coaching side, X's and O's wise, to make sure you have the best possible season you can by putting you in positions to succeed as often as possible. And so if we want to take a look at the top defensive line market, this is defensive tackles and edge rushers. Pro Football Focus has Khalil Mack 5th, Josh Sweat 10th, Hassan Reddick 12th, Malcolm Kunsey of the Raiders, I hope I pronounced that right, but I've seen some of his tape. Hey man, that's a sleeper right there at 16th. Osa Odigizua 30th, Milton Williams 32nd. He balled out for the Eagles this past year. Baron Browning 39th for the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, you have so many names in there that we could potentially look at as like combinations of we bring in this guy at edge rusher, this guy at defensive tackle. My favorite, if we're not trading for like a Myles Garrett, get Khalil Mack at edge rusher, get Osa Odigizua at defensive tackle, and this defensive line is way better than it was last year already. And so let's just take a step back. Say if we wanted to get either Ronnie Stanley or Alaric Jackson at left tackle, and then you wanted to go get both Khalil Mack and Osa Odigizua. Now, I'm just trying to put this into perspective so you know how much cap space we have to work with and why you should be so excited about this free agency period. If that's the way that the Commanders wanted to go, that would cost us about an estimate of like maybe $53 million per year. And with as much cap space as we're projected to have, that would still be plenty enough to sign not only our draft class, re-sign some of our key players like Bobby Wagner and Jeremy Chin, but you would also still have some money left over to make other moves in free agency if you really wanted to do, like go and get like a Javarius Ward, maybe a corner, maybe a really good wide receiver at the same time. So all in all, my main point is we have a lot of cap space to work with, and I'm expecting free agency to be really fun for us, man, especially since I trust Adam Peters to make smart decisions and Brandon Sosna to finesse the contracts. So again, even in like a best case scenario where you get, say, Alaric Jackson at left tackle, Khalil Mack at edge rusher, Osa Odigizua at defensive tackle, at what people are projecting to be the market value for those guys. And again, because we're Super Bowl contenders, we have an elite franchise quarterback, which gives these guys a better chance at competing and maybe winning some Super Bowls as they're only getting older, and that starts to become your priority as you get older. Then maybe these guys will even take somewhat less money to join us than they would for other teams. But even at market value, we will still have a lot of money left over to make even more moves, even after you got yourself a starting left tackle, a starting edge rusher in Khalil Mack, an improvement way beyond what we had last year, and also a starting defensive tackle that could be more dominant than what Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne gave us last year, and you would still have money to spend. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section, let me know if you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinion video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Really appreciate y'all. And of course, if you made it to this far in the video, I salute you. Really appreciate you. I mean, y'all are the GOATs. You make it all the way through these 30-minute videos. That's much love. And the answer to the trivia question was safety Derek Forrest. So that, I guess that's another reward for making it to the end of the video, but I just appreciate y'all for making it this far just in general. Of course, make sure you leave a like on the way out, and of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about all of this. The cap space that the Commanders have potentially. Jeremy Fowler saying that there's mutual interest between us and Cooper Kupp potentially, and Jeremy Fowler saying that, hey, we may address wide receiver, but we're more than likely going to do whatever it takes to improve the trenches as a priority, which I agree with, but let me know how y'all feel. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Let me know how you feel about a potential, I guess, mock free agency of signing Alaric Jackson, Khalil Mack, and Osa Odigizua. Like, let me know how y'all feel about that, or if you would switch it up. Do you prefer Ronnie Stanley over Alaric Jackson? Do you prefer some other tackle other than those two? Let me know how y'all feel about all of that. Again, make sure you leave a like on the way out. I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.